Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 9th of November 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you around 20 minutes of gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, Activision profits increase in stressful times, EA leans away from new IP, game developers on the subject of Windows 8, Call of Duty Black Ops to offer in-game YouTube live streaming on Xbox and PS3, and is Dead Space 3's co-op a cause for concern? It seems like over the last few days we've had a bit of bad news from various game publishers. However, Activision doesn't seem to be one of them, as they've reported that during its September quarter, the company saw revenues of $841 million. That's profits of $226 million, which is significantly more than was predicted by analysts. When it comes down to why, I would point specifically, as does indeed this article, to Skylanders. That has very much been the #1 selling franchise over the course of a great number of months. Digital sales have remained fairly similar at this point, while retail sales have jumped 43% when it comes to Activision titles, once again mostly down to Skylanders and the nature of that particular game with the purchase of various toys and booster packs. Box sales for Diablo 3 have also been surprisingly high, with the franchise in total pulling in sales figures of over 10 million copies, which for a PC exclusive release is really quite a large number indeed, and that's something that PC gamers should at least be happy about. Activision digital revenue has also increased, considering that the launch of Mists of Pandaria has increased player subscriptions back up to just over 10 million, which is up from 9.1 million in the last quarter. I have to say that the news Activision does well is not exactly all that surprising. The Skylanders game has been extremely successful for them, without question. They've really been on this peripheral binge over the last few years, and for the most part it seems to pay off for them. Guitar Hero was a great success for them for a while at least, and now of course they moved over to Skylanders, which combines some of the most successful elements of collectible card games, miniatures games, and of course action platformers with some fairly interesting characters on a variety of different platforms. Skylanders Giants has got off to a fairly good start as well. The momentum for that is really picking up. No big surprise, it's had a lot of really good reviews, and of course it has been highly anticipated indeed. The actual launch of Skylanders Giants has a 50% larger retail presence than its predecessor, if you can actually believe that. So I wouldn't be expecting this franchise to go anywhere in a hurry. If you hate Skylanders, well, tough. It is making a lot of money for Activision. And as I said, I find it hard to criticize that particular series. It's definitely a pricey thing indeed in order to collect all of these miniatures, but as someone that plays a hell of a lot of miniatures games and CCGs and was into them when I was younger, it would be fairly hypocritical of me to criticize that, because I see why it's so appealing. I see why it's so enjoyable. No doubt the release of Black Ops 2 will be a nice cap-off for the year for them, considering that, once again, the most pre-ordered title of all time and nonsense along those lines, it will sell. It's got a lot of marketing behind it. It's actually got a lot of positive buzz behind it, which is fairly rare. Even die-hard cynics are saying, this might be entertaining. This may have some elements that actually make the series just a little bit more interesting. Hell, it's got esports elements built into the game. That's actually impressing esports commentators, which honestly has not happened since Call of Duty 4, and Activision has very much shied away from the esports space when it comes to its Call of Duty titles. So I guess it's not all doom and gloom at the top right now, but we'll see how that works out in 2013. There's some good news on the EA front as well, although probably not what you were looking to hear, quite frankly. In a GamesIndustry.biz interview with Ethan Levy, a former BioWare producer, he claims that EA are shying away from new IP and moving towards casual titles on the basis of the success of The Simpsons Tapped Out. Now, The Simpsons Tapped Out, for those of you who do not know, is what we call a cow clicker. It is a mobile game whereby no actual skill is involved. It's essentially a giant time sink. You wait for stuff to be built, you then build other stuff. There generally isn't any strategy involved in it. The cow clicker genre was arguably started, at least in its most successful form, by Farmville, and has been going on ever since. The game, Levy claims, has generated $20.7 million for EA and a total of $29.6 million in revenue. Bear in mind, of course, that Apple takes a 30% cut. Now, that, as far as I'm concerned, is a ridiculous number. Absolutely absurd when you consider the nature of this particular title. The Simpsons Tapped Out is a very, very simple game indeed. There are many other games like it, and most likely it was produced in a short production cycle by a very small team. So it's not exactly hard to understand that EA are looking towards these low-investment, high-return projects. Levy is quoted as saying, "Big brands plus big marketing budget plus high production values equals dollars. This is the EA formula. They may have been late to the mobile and tablet freemium party, but now that they are here, they will out-compete the Dragon Veils and Tiny Monsters of the world. This formula may have finally run its course in the core space, where 80-plus rated Lord of the Rings, James Bond, and Godfather games have all fallen out of favor with gamers' wallets." This is not exactly good news at all. The article claims that only Army of Two, Dead Space, and Dragon Age will continue to see new versions for this particular generation of hardware. Oh my, so we're not going to be seeing a lot of original IP, which is unfortunate. This is the company, of course, that did originally bring us Dead Space, which was original IP, which is great. Army of Two, which is arguably okay. Mass Effect, of course. We know that Mass Effect 4 is in development, but it is most likely going to be coming out on the next generation of hardware at this rate, unless, of course, they decide to rush it, and I sincerely hope that they do not. Unfortunately, it means games like Mirror's Edge and Brutal Legend will quite clearly not be seeing new versions anytime soon. Oh man, it's really depressing to see, isn't it? When you've got Activision, who is pulling in record profits, and they're still releasing core games. Whatever you say about those games, whether it be Diablo or World of Warcraft and Call of Duty, they are still core games. They are AAA high production value titles aimed at core gamers. And they're doing this while EA is floundering and altering course, as it were, towards these more casual titles that are generating them a bunch of revenue. Now, $20 million doesn't really seem to be an awful lot, but considering what they invested in it in the first place, it doesn't really matter all that much. They can continue to make these titles. And honestly, when you think about it from a business standpoint, it's really hard to argue with them. It's an unfortunate combination of EA releasing really expensive, bad games, and then releasing a bunch of stuff on mobile devices that makes them a ton of money. And what do they look at? Well, they say, well, our mock reviews and our internal analytics clearly indicated that Medal of Honor Warfighter was actually far better than we thought it was, and as a result, it's clear that the space for AAA titles is shrinking and shrinking, and there's no money in it anymore. We as gamers, of course, know better. We know that Black Ops will sell a bajillion copies. We know that Halo 4 will sell a bajillion copies, and that plenty of AAA games this year have actually sold a reasonable amount, and it is simply down to the fact that EA has had an absolutely awful year when it comes to releasing games. They've released a lot of poor titles, they have released a lot of lousy DLC, and quite frankly have been about as anti-consumer as you could possibly get. There seems to be a battle between Activision and EA right now to be the most anti-consumer, and EA is currently winning by a country mile. It is really, honestly, as simple as make good games. They are not in a position where they have to worry like THQ, where they have to be concerned as to whether or not the latest in their IP, something like Darksiders that they put a lot of money behind, isn't actually making them as much money as they want. They have plenty of really good franchises that have the potential for really good games to be released within them. It's just simply not happening for them right now. If we see a good Dragon Age, if we see a good Dead Space, if we see a good Army of Two game, then I'm sure it will sell a decent number of copies indeed. But I have a feeling all this talk is really just a case of unfortunate timing after the absolute failure of Medal of Honor Warfighter. It's been quite some time since the comments from Gabe Newell declaring that Windows 8 was a catastrophe for PC gamers as well as game developers. Now that the OS is actually out, several developers have weighed in on the subject of whether or not he was actually right to call it a catastrophe, and the results are fairly mixed, although leaning towards the idea that very well he may have been. This Eurogamer article has a number of quotes and small interviews from a wide variety of different developers, including devs from Introversion as well as Sports Interactive, who developed Football Manager, which is a very popular game in the UK for PC. That I can tell you for a fact. It is in fact a bestseller every single year it comes out. Now, this is a long article. I'd recommend that you read it yourself, but some of the choice quotes include the idea that Microsoft very much has Apple envy. They want to be able to gain access to that revenue stream that Apple seems to have with its closed system. You cannot sell software on iOS without selling it through the Apple Store. The Apple Store takes a 30% cut. It is a gold mine for Apple. It is where all of this money is actually coming from. It is not coming from the sale of the hardware. Microsoft have been unable to do this up to this point on PC. They do have that kind of control, that level, on Xbox Live Arcade. They are looking to try and acquire it on PCs as well, which, in my opinion, is something of a curious move, considering that they have shown very little regard indeed for PC gamers over the last few years, going as far as to refuse to launch games on their own operating system because they would rather sell them on 360 and get a cut of the profits. There are a few interesting quotes, though, and this is the first time I've really heard a fairly strong counter-argument to the idea that Windows 8 is a bad thing. We had one from Aj Grand Scruton. Is that really his name? I hope I didn't screw that up, but he's actually part of a studio called Dalala, and they released a game called Janksy. And if they had released it on iOS, they claimed it would have just been completely buried under everything. However, since they were able to release it on the new Windows 8 store, they've got a lot of technical support, a lot of brand support from the Microsoft team, and have hopefully been able to secure a reasonable number of sales, although they don't actually go into that information whatsoever. It is a really difficult one because, honestly, this discussion is based very much on the slippery slope fallacy. It's not that Windows 8 is a closed garden environment. It's not that Windows 8 is not a proper desktop operating system, because that mode is very much there, alive and kicking. The problem is that certain developers believe that they are moving towards a walled garden approach whereby services like Steam and, of course, things like open source software and modding will become a thing of the past. Windows 8 does not do this. They're more concerned about Windows 9, Windows 10, and where Microsoft is actually going with this system, which is why they are lashing out at it right now. Unfortunately, of course, it's not necessarily based on the strongest of evidence. It is a slippery slope fallacy. It's by saying, oh, well, this is happening now, ergo, it means it will get worse further down the line. We don't necessarily know that. That said, from the perspective of someone who has been a PC gamer and has seen what Microsoft has been doing to the space, or more accurately, not doing to the space over the last few years, I wouldn't put it past them. We have to bear in mind that this is a company that owns the most dominant OS on PC, and yet has shown little regard for PC gaming. It has denied various releases such as Halo on PC, a market where it might have done fairly well. It has denied certain Xbox Live Arcade releases. It has got exclusivity periods on a wide variety of different games that later come out on PC and actually do better. It implemented the most god-awful system known to man in the form of games for Windows Live and flat-out refused to improve it, to the point where it did severe damage to a wide variety of PC ports and is only now being finally phased out. That could be construed as evidence of Microsoft's poor intentions when it comes to PC gaming. And no doubt they would prefer to sell copies on 360. Piracy rates are lower. They receive a cut of every sale. They do not receive a cut of every sale on PC. They do not have the kind of control over the market space that they would want, and yet the strength of PC gaming comes from its open nature. No doubt it's worth keeping an eye on how the Microsoft Store on Windows 8 actually ends up turning out, and of course what the future holds for Microsoft's OS going forward. Some interesting news from the Activision camp on the subject of Call of Duty Black Ops 2. It will be offering in-game live streaming to YouTube for PS3 and 360 owners, which Activision claims is the first of its kind. And as far as I know, Yes, it is the first of its kind. Console gamers will be able to stream their webcam as well as their headset, so they will be able to provide commentary and facecam where appropriate, and they will be able to stream directly to YouTube. It's an interesting announcement because it comes a day after EA announced Twitch support for Origin. Twitch TV, of course, being another live streaming site, which would allow gamers to utilize Origin to live stream a variety of Origin-supported games. I can only view this streaming thing as positive as far as I'm concerned. It shows, once again, something of a dedication to esports and competitive play from Treyarch and Black Ops 2, which is something they've been emphasizing over the past few months. It also means that console gamers are now finally able to jump on the bandwagon without having to acquire expensive hardware as well as software, which costs a little bit of money. We're talking, of course, about capture cards, HD PVRs, a fairly powerful PC, as well as license for XSplit if you wish to stream and actually make some money from it. This is a very interesting contrast to stuff that we heard from Microsoft about Halo a few weeks ago, when they clearly stated that no, they were not giving a license to monetize footage on YouTube. Now, again, as I pointed out when this first came around, this is not a new thing. You are actually not licensed to make money from video game footage on YouTube anyway. It's against the terms of service. The only people who are allowed to do that are network partners, and the networks possess the permissions and licenses in order to make that happen. But this time around, it seems like Activision is opening up the doors and saying, stream our game. Stream it for all you damn well like. We'll even provide in-game tools to allow you to do that. Super smart marketing, as far as I'm concerned. Call of Duty is not exactly a story-driven game. There's no real question about that. Its multiplayer is where the story comes from. It has a thriving content community built around the idea that you can produce videos for this game and people will watch them. Live streaming, of course, being another big deal. The fact that they are supporting it in such a way is something that I hope many other publishers take a very strong look at. I hope to see this built into StarCraft 2, another Activision Blizzard published game. That would be absolutely wonderful, making it much easier for people to get online and share their gameplay with other people, because you have no idea what kind of talent can be lurking under the surface, simply unable, for either monetary or technical reasons, to be able to put their content out on the internet. For me, as far as I'm concerned, this indicates higher competition across the space, which hopefully will lead to more innovation and increased quality standards across the board, as opposed to it being a case of who can afford the necessary equipment in order to make this happen. This is good news for everyone, assuming that you like watching Call of Duty streams. If you don't, well, it's easy enough to avoid. And finally, Visceral Games, the developers, of course, of the series Dead Space, have been talking a little bit about the subject of their co-op and trying to lay some of the concerns to rest as regards to the fact that it was put there in the first place. Co-op is very much something that doesn't really have a great deal of relevance in survival horror games and can more often than not go against the actual survival horror nature of these titles. There's a lengthy article on VG247 that you can check out in the description below this video, which is a co-op test of the game, which describes the nature of a somewhat asynchronous and asymmetrical co-op experience. It's very odd indeed. The notion is that Isaac will have a co-op partner by the name of John Carver, who is psychologically scarred by events that are introduced in the graphic novel, and then as you continue through the game with the pair of them, John Carver will actually be seeing different things to Isaac because he begins to hallucinate, he actually has schizophrenic attacks and a wide variety of other things, and the player playing Isaac will not actually see any of this stuff, so it will look like Carver is actually going crazy for no apparent reason. There will be a disparity between what the two players see, and that will create tension. At least that's the plan, at any rate. It sounds like a really interesting system, honestly. I was never one to really buy into the success of Dead Space. It's not a game that I've been particularly interested in at any point, but I like the idea of taking co-op in a different direction. Co-op has exploded over the past few years as a very popular way of increasing the longevity of a particular title, as well as providing a different way to experience it with a friend. However, there's not been a huge amount of innovation when it comes to co-op. It's more often than not being, press this at the same time as this guy in order to open this door. Shoot these guys together. There are more enemies. This, on the other hand, sounds really, really interesting. It sounds like a genuine co-op experience. Visceral have been quick to point out, by the way, that the game does feature a full and lengthy single-player campaign, and that you do not need to experience the game in co-op mode whatsoever in order to enjoy it. The game also features a rather interesting-looking crafting system, which might work out to be particularly good. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, looking at that co-op mode, this may very well be the first Dead Space game that I put some effort into playing, because that sounds like something truly innovative and very different when it comes to telling a story. I'm really hoping that it actually works out well and that success comes their way, because God knows Visceral could definitely use it at this point in time. Okay, folks, that wraps it up for today's content patch as well as the week. Thank you very much. I'd like to apologize that there has been a lack of content over the past week. As I pointed out, I have been in Austin, and unfortunately a number of other business-related issues have been taking a great deal of my time, plus my recording environment was not necessarily ideal. Hopefully I'll be back on schedule once I am done with the Lone Star Clash tournament, which is going on this weekend. I would highly recommend that you tune into it for some StarCraft 2 and high-level League of Legends action. I shall be casting alongside Day9 and Axel Toss for the StarCraft 2 tournament, and it will no doubt be very enjoyable indeed. I'll see you next time.